the presentation to begin, but hello, I'm Cindy Aden, Cindy Altick Aden. I'm the state librarian in Washington State, and I wanted to just give you a little bit of background to establish my credentials to be talking about this topic. And thanks to my colleagues at COSLA, I think that is how I got recruited, is through my association with the state librarians around the country, which is a fabulous organization, and I do enjoy leading the ebook working group for that group. So I have been the state librarian since August of 2016, and before that I worked for OCLC, which you guys, most of you I'm sure know, the world's largest library cooperative. And my role there was in business development. They created a kind of unusual role because I was sitting in Silicon Valley in San Francisco at the time I was recruited, and I was allowed to stay there. And so I worked with Bing and Goodreads and Google and Yelp and all kinds of startups, because what I was trying to do was get libraries, potential library users to discover us when they weren't on a library website or searching a library catalog. And so we were trying to make sure that people could always find a library when they started looking for a book, no matter where they were. It was a fun couple of years, and I think we made some real headway. So before that, I worked for Amazon.com, and I started my library life at Library of Congress as an intern for 2 years, and then I came to Washington State, where I worked for a university, University of Washington, and then went to the law library, and then ended up at a public library, and then left libraries and went to work for Amazon and Corbis and OCLC, and here I am. So I've had a varied background, to say the least, but I've spent a lot of time in the ebook world and the publishing ecosystem. So one of the things I wanted to do, let's see, I'm going to advance the slide, and the next slide you're supposed to just ignore because it's the slide that tells us that I should start the recording, which we have done. See? And then we'll go to the next slide. I'm sorry that this print isn't larger, but I will share these slides. I'm very indebted to one of my colleagues who I gave her some of the notes about the what I thought the timeline was, and she ran with it and really developed a beautiful timeline. Yakima Valley Libraries, that Julie did this for me, Julie Walker. So I know that it's small print, so I'll just run through some of the things that I think are important about it. And it is interesting to note that ebooks haven't been around that long. And as you remember, in the early days, there were a lot of different readers, and ebooks were really seen as kind of a fringe thing. Everyone could see how they could be useful, but it was hard for them to get traction for the longest time. And they didn't really get into libraries until around 2006, 2007. That's when Overdrive became sort of, I would say, the most resourceful vendor. There were several other ebook vendors in the space, and there were several readers, but slowly over the years, Amazon and its Kindle format and the Kindle reader kind of became the dominant and preferred reader, and Overdrive really started negotiating deals so that libraries really could have ebooks in their libraries. And of course, it got the deal with Amazon that allowed it to present the Kindle format, and that was a game changer for Overdrive, but also for libraries, because now everybody could read ebooks in the format they wanted. There was a lot of conflict as ebooks became more popular, as publishers tried to adjust to ebooks. The pricing model was different. They weren't comfortable with the way that Amazon was driving down the price to make it really consumer friendly. They tried to do something about it. They got hauled into the Department of Justice, and there was a charge of collusion. They shouldn't have been talking to each other. They shouldn't have been trying to figure out what the pricing was together. Since that time, they've been very, very careful. By they, I mean the publishing industry in general is very careful about what they talk about together, or even if they get together. It's made for an interesting fragmented situation for anyone who wants to work with the publishing industry, because you have to be so careful about how you approach them, and you have to talk to them one-on-one. Overdrive has been very successful in negotiating deals and getting ebooks. One of the things, however, that's been sort of challenging about the Overdrive relationship is that, ironically, there have been a lot of improvements, I would say, for the user, in that you can type in a book title into Google, for example, and in some markets, it'll pop up that there's a nearby library that has this as an ebook. You can be invited to apply for a library card. And so in some cases, the experience of being driven to borrow an ebook can be very seamless. This is great for libraries. It gives us a lot of visibility, but it started to really worry publishers. And then in 2017, one of the big 5 publishers, Macmillan, started to experiment with the notion of holding some titles back from libraries and seeing if they would sell better. And the idea was, for the first 8 or 12 weeks of a book, let's not sell it. Let's not sell it to the library market. Let's just see if it's not available at the library, if users will go out and buy it. And that experiment went on for the summer, and then it was quiet. And then the next year, the next fall, Macmillan, this was 2019, so I'm sorry, I guess it was 18 when they did that experiment with one of their imprints, with Tor, which is a sci-fi imprint. So the next year, they did a bigger push, and on November 1st of last year, they announced that they were going to put an 8-week embargo on all titles. And of course, the library world exploded, and I'm sure you were aware there were all kinds of boycotts of Macmillan content, ebook content, but in some cases print content. Some libraries responded by buying more print so their users could still get a hold of the titles they thought they would need. Other libraries responded by not buying any ebooks nor print. And John Sargent, the CEO of Macmillan, tried very hard to talk to libraries about what was happening. And libraries were really upset at him. And he, I think, learned a lot about libraries. I think he was a little tone deaf at first. He didn't understand. He's a businessman, and he said, look, I know how much libraries are spending on ebooks. I'm trying to do you a favor. I think that if it's too expensive for you to buy a really hot new title where you have to keep buying more and more copies of it, look, I'm doing you a favor. Let's just wait till the title cools off a little bit. You won't have to spend as much money. No harm, no foul. And he completely, I think, misread how important it is for libraries to serve their users, but also for us to remain relevant and at the table and serving our customers. It was quite an exercise in trying to communicate across 2 completely different points of view and frames of reference, I would say. The boycott ended in March of this year. And to be fair to Macmillan, he always said it was a pilot and he was going to end it. I heard him say at least once that he was going to end it in March, and he did. He admitted to a group of librarians who went to hear him in February, in midwinter, that it hadn't been a very lucrative experiment for him. He was kind of rueful, almost, I would say, kind of laughing like, oh boy, it wasn't that great an idea. It got Macmillan a lot of negative press, but it did some great things for all of us. I
apologize. Sorry for interrupting. I'm seeing in the chat, some people are asking for you to move the slide up, and for also, can you speak up, because some participants, they can't hear you.
Oh, I hate that when they can't hear. All right, here I go. I've moved the laptop even closer to me. I'm not sure how I can move it up because it's already all the way, it's taking up my entire screen. I don't know if I can control the size of it, but I promise you that I will share these slides.
Okay.
And I know it's a dense list of events.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Here, I'm gonna shift to the next slide, which has got a little. Oh no, it's just as dense. That's kind of the. Oh wait, pardon me. Let's see, slide 2. Let's see if we can get to the second one. So there we go. There's slide 2, which ends with Overdrive being acquired by a private equity company in December of last year. So I think that the advantage to all of this drama and how upset we all got and how shocking it was that a publisher could decide to withhold books from a library was that libraries had the opportunity to talk more about what the experience has been like for them to try and provide ebooks and to educate their patrons about what's going on in the ebook world. And it also gave us the opportunity as librarians to learn a little bit more about the whole publishing ecosystem. So where we are today is that there are no embargoes going on, but a lot of people are waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're still paying a lot of money, and by we, I'm always talking about libraries collectively, not the state library, but we libraries are paying a lot of money for our ebook budgets. And the dominant vendor in the field is Overdrive, which was just purchased by a private equity firm that is very interested in making money on its acquisition. So it's fair to consider that perhaps we need to rethink this whole formula. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about. Is my belief is that libraries need to step back and consider a different role in this ecosystem. And they have to acknowledge that to be a good partner, we have to understand our partner's point of view. We have to understand what drives them. They have to understand us. And we have to try and find some middle ground together. And I honestly really do believe that is possible. I will tell you that when Mr. Sargent and people at Amazon and other publishers, when everybody in the ecosystem says, we love libraries, they're not lying. They recognize the value of libraries to society, but also to creating more users, to promoting authors. They know that all of that is happening. And they keep saying, look, if this isn't about libraries being a public good and a worthwhile institution, this is about money and marketplace. And the fact that from the point of view of many in the book business, the growing popularity of ebooks in libraries with the flattening of the sale of ebooks in the open marketplace is alarming. It feels out of balance is the word that Mr. Sargent used. And so they're pleading with us to look at this with them. So I'm very fortunate here in Washington State. I have a couple of super smart people to help me work on this. My own staff at the State Library are awesome, and we've formed a little team and we're working together. Whatcom County Library is the library system that hosts, they started the library consortium, ebook consortium in our state. 44 libraries belong to it. And one of the staff who does a lot of work on that, Carmi Parker, many of you will recognize her name. She has been out front trying to educate people about the boycott and trying to do a lot of number crunching to figure out what libraries should do and what the real truth is. So I would suggest that there are a couple of different prongs, if you will, of approach that libraries can take with this. And right now they're all being pursued. There's the legislative approach. And that approach says, we better make sure that an ebook is treated like a print book in terms of the library's opportunity to purchase it and loan it. And right now, the driving piece of legislation that underpins the ability of a library to buy a book and loan it is the copyright law of 1909. And there's a right of first sale provision. And basically that says if you buy the book, you can do whatever you want with it. Give it away, loan it, resell it. And that doesn't apply, of course, in the digital realm. And so some people are saying, we need to really look at this very closely. And then there are other legislative approaches, just saying, look, libraries are a public good. They should be allowed to do this. And anyone that gets in our way and embargoes, we need to educate our senators and our legislators about how this is working and make sure they're all on libraries' side. Of course, libraries did some embargoing and some boycotting of their own of content, and that talking with your pocketbook is another way to try and make an impression. There is also the idea that we should look at new licensing models. This is one of the things that Carmi and my staff are working on. We have some colleagues at DPLA, the Digital Public Library of America. They are the marketplace for the Simply E app, which is the New York Public Library created ebook platform. And DPLA provides the marketplace, the content that can be hosted on Simply E. and I'm working with some of them too, and we're talking about how can we approach publishers and even Amazon and find something that meets in the middle. And the one idea that I think we've stepped away from that we're exploring is the idea that libraries successfully lent hard copy books. Sometimes publishers were a little upset about it over the years. There have been some people that have complained, but really it was a model that worked, that everyone was willing to live with. And so one idea is, well, why don't we look at what the print model is in terms of royalties and per read expense, royalty to the author and cost to the publisher, and let's just make the print and the ebook align. And by the way, you'd be interested to know that when you do that math and look at that, we come up with an ebook model that is more affordable than the one any of the ones we've got now. It costs less, and we think that it can be supported. So we're pursuing that, hoping to get in front of some people who could make a difference. But it's an interesting idea to see if we can try and get everyone to agree on what the numbers are and how this might look different. One of the things that we're doing here in Washington State is exploring a completely alternative ebook model. Simply E is still run by New York Public Library with an advisory group from all over the industry. DPLA is a not-for-profit that you know perhaps because in the beginning they were hosting a lot of digital content that was created by libraries and trying to amplify that content and that content's discoverability. And it has become the marketplace. And the folks at DPLA are busy talking to publishers and creating their own licensing models that are more to libraries and that publishers tolerate, that can support. And so we in Washington State said, you know, we have a consortium of 44 library systems. We have 18 other library systems in this state that are bigger. They serve more than 100,000 people. So they're not allowed by the vendor, Overdrive, to be part of our consortium because the vendor wants to sell to them independently, make them pay for their own platform costs, buy their books independently. Isn't there some way we can provide a statewide platform that's more equitable and more affordable and more library friendly? So that's the path we've chosen to walk right now. And we're doing that by working with Simply E and DPLA. You have to find a hosting company. We chose to work with Lyrasis, but Khalifa and Amigos are also in this space as library-based organizations that can provide the hosting and the setup to help you provide Simply E as an alternative to Overdrive in your state. And the way it looks so far, because we've just started, is there's a very friendly mobile app. It looks and feels a lot like the Libby app. And as a library gets set up with Simply E, it can display its own Overdrive content that it's already bought, any other ebook content that it has, and it can display the content that the state library has purchased so that it's available for all people across the state. So we like this idea that there's still some local control and that libraries can make the decision that they still really want to put a lot of money into bestsellers, for example, but that the whole state can still have some content it all has access to, and we have one platform. Of course, we're in the early stages. It'll be interesting to see if users take to the new mobile app. We're going to, I think one of the key pieces of this is education, to tell people, patrons, why we're doing this, why it matters, why they're supporting their library with this, and then to just see what the adoption rate is like, see if the platform is as robust, if it can do all the things we want it to do. But it feels like the right direction to try and do something that's library friendly, more cost effective, and puts the library in the driver's seat. So I would say that one of the most challenging things about the position we find ourselves in is that ironically, in trying to serve patrons better, in trying to provide a completely seamless, frictionless experience, just like you would have if you bought an ebook on your Kindle from Amazon. We've upset the apple cart, I guess I would say. We have caused some alarm. It's a strange place for libraries to be considered harmful to authors. We don't buy that. We don't think that's true, and we certainly don't want to be in that place, but we don't even want those kinds of conversations to be going on, because we know how much we do for readers, for literacy, and for authors in our communities. One of the things that I think libraries have to remember that we have always done and that we do really well is that we are the ones who can recommend books that people might otherwise not have heard of. We're the ones that can create a new bestseller in our own community by focusing on, for example, a display of indie titles, alternative press titles, and inviting those authors in, creating some kind of event, doing a summer reading program. There are all kinds of ways that we can try and control our consumers' behavior. I will tell you that here in Washington State, we had one of our directors, Tamara Meredith from Jefferson County, put out a survey, and she got a lot of publicity. And so the survey was spread. I shared it with my colleagues, my state library colleagues. Some of them sent it out to their states. So she got responses from across the country. And the key question that we all wanted the answer to was, what does a patron do when they they go online to find a book and they can't find it? What is an ebook? What is their next act? And what Tamara's research found is that just about over 50% of the time, a user will find another ebook. And maybe they'll put a hold on the one that they couldn't get, but they'll move on for another ebook. About 30-some% of the time, now see, I should have these numbers right in front of me and I don't. A little over 30% of the time, they actually will go to the print version. They really were intent on getting that one book and they want it now. And then 8% of the time, they'll actually go buy the book in an ebook format if they couldn't find it at that moment they were looking for it. And I think all of you who work in libraries would say, yeah, that's about right. A lot of ebook users love that format. They want the convenience, and they have a big long list of books they want. And if they're genre readers like romance or sci-fi or fantasy, they'll take a lot of different kinds of books. They're very open to reading new authors because the genre matters so much to them. And buying an ebook, if you're a library user already and you're wedded to your ebook reader, you might not buy very often. So it underscored what we already knew was true, but it does make us realize that there's some room for talking about how to balance this ecosystem, given all of these factors. I think that libraries have an opportunity to step up, if you will, to be part of the conversation, to signal that they're willing to really talk about these issues instead of simply saying, forget it, we're a public good and, there's nothing more to talk about here. As we have explored our licensing models and talked, John Sargent is the one mostly that we've been able to talk to because he's been so willing to get new ideas. You would be surprised that there is a little room for opportunity now. And certainly libraries have made their voices heard. So I think I'm going to pause here because I am not looking at the chat, but I've asked Tiffany, my wonderful student assistant, to monitor chat, and there may start to be some questions here. So I'm going to pause or stop and take questions.
Okay, I am monitoring the chat now, and there is a question from Patty Mott, to everyone. And the question is, how successful have people been lending out readers?
That's a great question. I've seen a lot of data on that over the years. And I would say in this COVID time, it's even more challenging to do. But I'm sorry that I don't have anything really recent to point to. I can just tell you from my own background of listening to people talk about it, that it can work. The readers can get damaged. It is important that we try and help people who really don't have any kind of device, but lending out devices has a lot of challenges to it in terms of getting the equipment back and keeping it operational. You usually need another staff person or half of one to help take care of that equipment. That has been my background. Anybody else who has something they'd like to say on that is welcome to add it to chat if they've done it firsthand.
Let's see. And there's just one comment, let's see, from Rebecca, and she states that she would believe that e-reader lending would slow as everybody joins the smartphone generation.
That's right, that a lot of people are reading by their phones now, and the phones are getting bigger, so it's even easier to do.
The statement was from Paul.
You know, one thing I'll say is that there's an interesting movement afoot to consider a kind of a turnkey or a starter kit, if you will, for small libraries, where there could be an app and a set of titles and have the whole thing be very simple so that you could easily be onboarded and try it. And I know that it's daunting, especially for small libraries. You really look to your state to help you, perhaps with a statewide initiative. And a lot of states are doing that right now. There have been historically a lot of different kinds of consortiums around the country. And with this adoption of Simply E, I know of 5, I think, states that are moving to Simply E across their states, and the state library is behind it. So for small and rural libraries, that might be the best and easiest way to get on board, is if you can be part of something bigger.
And let me see. Jessica states that her organization offers preloaded e-readers, Kindles, and Nooks. However, most people seem to have their own devices now.
Interesting. You know, that's very much like what the Library for the Blind does. They preload cassettes with all kinds of books that their users have asked for and send them out to them, or download, or people can download them. So that idea certainly is being used in the audiobook space already for those who can't read standard print.
And Paul asked a question, will small libraries be able to afford Simply E?
I think the answer is yes. And the reason I say that is because I'm aware that there is a movement afoot to try and make it very affordable, and to perhaps use grant money to try and create some kind of, I'm calling it a starter kit, but create something that even small libraries can get on board with. I do think that there's a lot of interest in seeing this happen in this Simply E space, because there's a lot of interest in seeing if an alternative library-owned and driven ebook platform with friendlier library terms could get real traction. And so in order for that to be truly tested, we're going to have to see it widely available. So yes, I think things are going to happen in that arena.
And Cindy asks, how has usage changed with COVID and closures?
Oh boy. And certainly we've seen it in our own consortium. I've heard it from my colleagues across the country. Of course, usage is way up. I was just talking to a state library this morning, and they just added an extra $500,000 to their budget. So there has been a lot of attention on ebooks as a result of people not being able to get into their libraries and having to stay sheltered in place.
Another question is, does Simply E only have fiction titles, or are there nonfiction materials available as well?
Simply E is simply a platform. You can put on it whatever you want, and there are a lot of different kinds of content that can be read on Simply E. DPLA recently got a grant to try and explore state and government document content. So they're always looking for different things to put up there. We here in Washington State, one of the ideas we had is that some of our older books, our Northwest Collection books, we would love to see those available to be read on this platform and open up the state library's collection. So the beauty of Simply E is the intention is that it be a very broad, a neutral, if you will, platform that could host a lot of different kinds of content and give the library the opportunity to pick what it wants.
And another question from Laura is, how will the usage change as things start opening back up? Will it still be high? Because there's a lot of uncertainty. No one really knows.
I think that we're going to have a long, slow reopening, is my guess. No one knows what it's going to be like this fall, for example, if schools are going to be shut again and kids are going to be locked out of their school libraries again. And so it's going to be a while until, well, we could say that it's likely we're never going to go back to the normal we had before because we've learned things that have made us behave differently. And I would say that the convenience of ebooks, once you have learned to use the device and learn how to download them, once you've discovered them, it's likely that if there have been a lot of new users as a result of COVID, that they will continue to be ebook readers.
And I just wanted to say it is 2:02.
I just saw that. Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah. I think that there are other programs. There's a program every half hour, it sounds like. So probably we should let you all go to your next session. Thank you very much for joining us, Tiffany and me this afternoon. And I will send these, this is all the slides there were. I wanted to put the timeline up. So I'll send that timeline out so you all can look at it. And I think I put a little readers list together too. So there'll be some additional reading for you too, if you're interested. Thank you very, very much.
Cindy, would you like for me to cut the video?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I just stopped my video. Let's call it good.
Okay.
I'm glad. Oh, the Gilman Library. Nice. I